My wife demanded I apologize to her best friend for supposedly offending him. I agreed. But what I did next at his house destroyed 2 marriages in less than 10 minutes. The worst part was discovering I had been funding my own betrayal for years. My wife insisted I say sorry to her best friend for embarrassing him. I calmly agreed, but what I did next obliterated 2 marriages in less than 10 minutes. My name is Vincent, and I am 42 years old. I work as an IT systems engineer for a large medical tech company in London. Until 3 weeks ago, I honestly believed my marriage was rock solid. My wife, Natalie, and I have 2 wonderful children, Dylan, who is 16, and Clara, who is 14. We had a good, peaceful life, or so I naively thought. Everything came crashing down on a Thursday evening, just after I got home from a brutal 12-hour shift of non-stop chaos with the company's servers. I walked in completely exhausted, having not even had a moment for lunch. But Natalie was standing planted in the kitchen, her arms crossed, wearing that tense, cold expression of someone who had already passed sentence. She demanded an urgent conversation. The reason was Theo, her best friend of 6 years, who is married to Patricia. Natalie accused me of humiliating him at a barbecue the previous weekend. It all happened because, during a supposed congratulatory hug, his hand lingered on her lower back for 10 long, uncomfortable seconds. I didn't make a public scene. I just pulled him aside and quietly asked him to respect our boundaries. But Natalie immediately turned me into the paranoid villain of the story. She demanded that I apologize to Theo to save their friendship and end the awkward atmosphere. That was the sentence that tore me apart inside, showing me with crystal clarity that their friendship mattered far more than our own marriage and my comfort. I looked at her, my throat dry. I took a deep breath and agreed to talk to him. She smiled with that victorious relief of someone who thought she had perfectly controlled the entire situation. She had no idea what kind of devastating conversation I was actually preparing. That silent night, lying in bed next to her, a cold, calculating anger took hold of me and wouldn't let me sleep. I stared at the ceiling, processing months of small, obvious signs that I had chosen to ignore to keep the peace. The completely new, expensive perfume she started wearing about 6 months ago, the nervous, evasive way she would hide her phone screen whenever I walked into the room unexpectedly. Around 2 a.m, the bedside table vibrated rapidly 3 times in a row with urgent notifications on her phone. She continued to sleep soundly, probably very relaxed because I had given in to the argument without a fight. I waited a good 5 minutes, then carefully picked up the device and saw that, surprisingly, it had no passcode. The screen lit up, full of messages from Theo. He desperately wanted to know if I was going to apologize and said how much he hated that they had to be so careful with their secret. My chest caved in, but I kept my breathing extremely calm as I read the entire chat history. There it was. The undeniable intimacy, the ridiculous inside jokes, and the messages about missing each other, sent at the exact times I was stuck in the office, working hard. I took precise photographs of every detail and sent them all to a secret folder in my personal email. My intuition screamed at me to dig even deeper. I accessed the shared cloud photo backups that she had forgotten to unlink from my devices several years ago. I discovered a very suspicious photograph of her, taken about 3 months ago in a luxury hotel room with soft lighting where she was holding a glass of wine. The caption spoke enigmatically about the need to feel alive again. The photo's internal technical data pointed to a location in Manchester, precisely during the days of a supposed work conference she had allegedly attended alone. Without hesitating, I checked Theo's public social media profile and found a photo of him at a restaurant in Manchester that very same weekend. The reflection in the mirrored glass behind him was unmistakable. It showed the distinct silhouette and profile of my wife. I downloaded absolutely all the evidence. Then, on my own phone, I opened our joint bank account statements. The financial picture was utterly devastating. There were dozens of constant cash withdrawals. £200 here, £300 there. It all coincided perfectly with the days she claimed to be out innocently with her close girlfriends. By 4 a.m, I had managed to compile a robust, bulletproof dossier with clear facts of a consistent betrayal that had been going on for at least 18 months. I placed her phone back in the exact same spot and lay back down, now consumed by a frigid, merciless determination. But the darkest revelation, the one that served as the major turning point and destroyed any remaining drop of compassion I had left, was yet to come. The next morning, while Natalie was in the shower, I decided to do a quick search in our daughter Clara's room to gather clothes for the wash. That's when I found a crumpled piece of paper hidden under her pillow. It was a painful, terrified outpouring of emotion, written in a hurry. The note said that exactly 1 month ago, Clara had come home earlier than expected and caught her mother and her friend Theo in our own kitchen, in an undeniably intimate embrace. When they were startled by the door opening, they jumped apart, frightened. Natalie not only lied shamelessly about the real reason for his visit, but also threatened and made our own daughter promise to keep a dark secret. She psychologically terrorized her so she wouldn't tell me anything and give me, as she put it, the wrong idea. They weren't just laughing behind my back and spending our family's hard-earned money. Natalie had dragged our innocent daughter into the middle of her moral filth, forcing a teenager to carry a gigantic and destructive emotional weight. My pure heartache instantly transformed into a tactical, calculated rage. From that exact, decisive moment, my one and only objective was the meticulous, surgical, and irreversible destruction of her castle of lies. The game had finally changed, and now the rules would be dictated exclusively by me. Friday morning arrived with a cold, clear purpose. Natalie was taking her morning shower. I went straight to our home office and opened her laptop without hesitation. She always left it unlocked. Her overconfidence would be her downfall. In her email inbox, I found a hidden folder named Work Trips. Inside were numerous reservations for high-end luxury hotels in Manchester and Edinburgh. The receipts always showed 2 guests registered and the best king-sized bed. The special requests always included champagne service in the room. I took photographs of every single document. The rage no longer controlled me. I was simply a machine gathering evidence. Then, I delved into her cloud storage files. I found a hidden document that functioned as a private journal. The words she wrote were a punch to the gut. She described how Theo made her feel like she was 25 again. She described with disdain how I had become too complacent and how easy it was to lie to me. She even questioned whether she was in love with him. I photographed every page. My mind was focused on the destruction of this theatre of deceit. When she came downstairs, I feigned a frighteningly natural demeanor. I asked her to set up the meeting with Theo and Patricia for the weekend, with the excuse that I wanted to apologize. She beamed, radiant at my submission. She gave me a kiss and left for work. The moment the door closed, I went to investigate something that had been bothering me. Theo worked in commercial real estate. He earned a reasonable salary, but his lifestyle was inconsistent with his income. I looked up the public records for his company, where he was a vice president, and that's when fate handed me the perfect weapon. The ownership structure revealed a fascinating detail. The main investor, holding 35% of the company's shares, was my own investment firm. A firm I had created 8 years ago with money from an inheritance, a firm Natalie knew nothing about. I called my longtime financial manager. He confirmed that my investment had saved Theo's business from bankruptcy 5 years ago. More than that, he informed me that as the largest shareholder, I had the legal power to demand the dismissal of the entire board. The irony was cruel. I was financing the man who was sleeping with my wife. I was indirectly paying for the hotels and the gifts. I took advantage of Saturday afternoon while she pretended to be at the gym to search our bedroom. I went to the back of the wardrobe and found 3 large cardboard boxes hidden there. Men's clothes with tags still on and expensive aftershaves, all in sizes that would fit Theo. Never me. But the real turning point was in the last box. I found an envelope with the letterhead of a private medical clinic. They were confidential reports from 8 months ago. Natalie had become pregnant and had a secret abortion. The emergency contact listed was Theo. The worst part? I had a vasectomy exactly 3 years ago. She herself drove me to the clinic. She knew it was impossible for me to be the father. I photographed the medical reports and saved everything. My phone buzzed with a message from Theo, confirming the meeting at his house for Sunday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The trap was set. In less than 24 hours, I would make their world come crashing down. The blind husband who was going to apologize was dead. I was going to deliver them hell. Sunday arrived, the day of my supposed redemption. The air in Surrey was heavy, thick with the kind of dampness that precedes a storm, matching my mood perfectly. Natalie was radiant, dressed in an elegant outfit, as if we were on our way to a gala celebration and not a moral execution. She hummed quietly in the car, occasionally touching my arm with a false affection that made me feel deeply nauseous. I kept my hands firm on the steering wheel, my eyes fixed on the road ahead, mentally rehearsing every piece of evidence I carried in the black leather briefcase on the back seat. That briefcase contained the end of the world as they knew it. We parked in front of Theo and Patricia's house, a luxurious detached home in Weybridge, which I now knew was partially sustained by my own sweat and investments. Patricia opened the door with a forced smile. It was the look of someone who knows something is wrong in the air, but tries to keep up appearances at all costs. Theo was sitting on the living room sofa with an irritating air of superiority, holding a glass of wine as if he were the king of the castle. He looked at me with a condescension that almost made me laugh. Natalie gave him a quick hug, a touch that lasted a second longer than socially acceptable, and sat down next to him, leaving me and Patricia in the armchairs opposite. The stage was set. Natalie began to speak in a soft, manipulative voice, explaining how I had reflected on my rude behavior at the barbecue, and how I was here to apologize and restore harmony between our families. Theo nodded, making a magnanimous gesture with his hand, as if he were granting me his royal pardon. It was at that moment that I stood up slowly. A silence fell over the room, a silence so dense and electric you could feel it. There was no fury in my voice, only an absolute, icy calm that seemed to freeze the atmosphere. I opened the briefcase and took out the first set of photographs. I placed them on the coffee table, spreading them out like cards from a marked deck. They were the images from the hotel in Manchester, the check-in records, the photos of the two of them in the restaurant that I had extracted from social media. Theo's smile vanished instantly, replaced by a deathly pallor. Natalie tried to speak, her hands trembling visibly, but I ignored her completely. I continued placing documents on the table, the bank statements with the cash withdrawals, the invoices for the expensive clothes she hid in our wardrobe, and the screenshots of the text messages where they planned their trysts at my expense. Patricia leaned forward, picking up one of the photographs with trembling fingers. I saw the exact moment her heart broke and her reality crumbled. She looked at her husband, waiting for a denial, but Theo was silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. But I wasn't finished yet. I took out the report from the medical clinic and the record of my vasectomy from 3 years ago. I explained without any emotion that the pregnancy they had secretly terminated 8 months ago could not have been mine. The shock in the room was so palpable you could almost cut it with a knife. Natalie began to sob, trying to grab my hand, but I pulled away as if she were toxic. The final blow was the coldest of all. I removed the shareholder structure document for Theo's company. I explained to them that I was the majority investor keeping his company alive, and that the very next morning, my first action would be to call an emergency general meeting to dismiss Theo for gross misconduct and breach of trust. He would not only lose his mistress and his marriage, but he would also lose his career and his livelihood on the same day. I looked at Natalie and told her that her bags were already packed and that the front door of our house was being watched by a security guard I had hired. She would never set foot in that house again, nor would she have access to the accounts I had already frozen. The humiliation was total. Theo tried to stand up to attack me in a last, desperate gesture of masculine rage, but Patricia stopped him with a scream of pure contempt, throwing her wine in his face. I walked out of that house without looking back, feeling the weight of years of lies falling from my shoulders. As I walked to the car, I heard the shouts of the argument erupting from inside the house. The house of cards had collapsed. Justice had not been violent, but it had been absolute. I got into the car alone, started the engine, and felt for the first time in a very long time that I was once again the master of my own destiny. The silence on the drive home was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The plan for revenge was complete, but the rebuilding of my life and the lives of my children was just beginning. I had destroyed 2 marriages in 10 minutes, but I had saved my own dignity from a lifetime of falsehood. In the days that followed that devastating afternoon in Weybridge, the world around me seemed to move in slow motion, yet with a mathematical precision. The silence in our house, now empty of Natalie's presence, was broken only by the rhythmic sound of my keyboard as I finalized the last details of the divorce proceedings. There was no room for hesitation or second chances. Through my solicitor, I sent a formal notice demanding her immediate departure from our primary property. She tried to show up at the door twice, drenched in tears and making desperate pleas for forgiveness. But I kept the door locked and my eyes cold. Her betrayal hadn't been an impulsive mistake. It had been a meticulous, years-long construction, and the response would be equally structured. The situation with my children, Dylan and Clara, was the most painful part, but also the most necessary. I sat down with them, and without going into sordid details that might traumatize them further, I explained that trust had been broken irreversibly. Clara, with that look of someone carrying the weight of the world, handed me her phone and showed me the manipulative messages her mother had sent her. It was there I realized that my ex-wife had no moral boundaries. She had tried to make her own daughter a silent accomplice to her infidelity. I used that evidence to secure a custody clause that would protect the kids from her toxic influence during the transition period. The family court in London was swift in reviewing the evidence of emotional neglect and the unjustified financial expenditures she had made with family money. In the professional realm, my revenge against Theo was executed with the coldness of a security algorithm. On Monday morning, I called the extraordinary general meeting of the commercial real estate company where he was vice president. As the majority investor, I presented a detailed dossier, not about the personal betrayal, but about the financial irregularities I had discovered. He had used the company's entertainment funds to pay for the luxury hotels and dinners with Natalie, disguising them as meetings with fictitious clients. His dismissal was approved unanimously in less than 30 minutes. He left the building escorted by security, carrying his belongings in a cardboard box, exactly as I had planned. His name was tarnished in the UK's capital markets, and doors began to close for him, one by one. Meanwhile, Patricia, Theo's wife, became an unexpected ally. We met at a discreet cafe in Belgravia to align our legal strategies. She was devastated, but possessed an admirable resilience. We discovered that Theo had taken out loans in her name to support the lifestyle he was leading with Natalie. We decided to join forces and share all forensic resources to ensure that neither of the two traitors would walk away with any financial advantage from this disaster. Patricia revealed to me that Theo had already tried to approach her for a reconciliation, using the excuse that Natalie was the one who had seduced him, but she simply sent him the divorce papers and a copy of his eviction notice. Natalie, now without my financial support, without her lover, and without the career her social status afforded her, moved into a small, rented flat in the suburbs. She began to feel the real weight of the life she had despised. The friends who once surrounded her vanished as soon as the truth about her manipulative behaviour became public. London's social circles can be small, and the news that she had used her own daughter to hide an extramarital affair spread like wildfire. She would send me long, rambling emails, sometimes begging for money, other times insulting me for my lack of compassion. I never replied to a single one. Each message was just another piece of evidence archived by my solicitor. The financial impact on her was total. As we had a well-defined prenuptial agreement and the proof of adultery and mismanagement of joint funds was overwhelming, she was left with only what was legally required, which was not nearly enough to maintain the life of luxury she had grown accustomed to. I started to see my children recovering their joy. Dylan refocused on his football training, and Clara began therapy to process the trauma of her mother's manipulation. Our house once again became a refuge, a place of honesty. I spent my evenings organising our new routine, feeling a peace I hadn't felt in almost 2 decades. Justice is not just about punishing those who do wrong. It's about clearing the path for those who want to live with integrity. I had cut out the cancer that was destroying my family, and although the scar was deep, the body was finally beginning to heal. The 4th phase of my journey was complete. The guilty were isolated, and the innocent were protected. Now, all that was left was to look to the horizon and decide what the rest of my life would look like, far from the shadows and lies of a past I had already left behind. 3 years have passed since that Sunday afternoon in Weybridge imploded my old reality. Today, sitting on the terrace of my new house overlooking the sea in Cornwall, I look back and see that the destruction was, in fact, a necessary form of deep cleaning. The late afternoon sun bathes the horizon in shades of orange and purple, and the sound of the waves seems to carry away the last echoes of that bitter betrayal. My current life is the direct result of choosing truth over convenience and dignity over fear. The divorce was finalised 18 months ago. It was an exhausting bureaucratic battle, but the results were just. Because I had irrefutable proof of financial misconduct and psychological manipulation of a minor, the court ruled in my favour. Natalie lost almost everything she had accumulated at the expense of my hard work. She now lives in a small rented flat inland, far from the glitz and prestige of the capital. I recently heard through mutual acquaintances that she has tried to find several jobs in her marketing field, But her reputation in London has been so tarnished that no one wants to associate their brand with someone who has such a documented history of lacking integrity. She has become a ghost of her former self, a living lesson that beauty and manipulation have a very short shelf life when the truth comes to light. Theo met an even darker fate. After being fired from the company because of me, he tried to start his own real estate consulting business. However, without the capital I was indirectly injecting and without Patricia's support, he went bankrupt in less than a year. The last I heard of him, he was working as a used car salesman in a small town, desperately trying to pay child support and his accumulated debts. He lost the luxury house, the social prestige, and above all, the respect of anyone who knew him, even slightly. Poetic justice was served cold. The man who thought himself superior and untouchable was ultimately consumed by his own mediocrity and lack of character. As for my children, Dylan and Clara, their transformation has been miraculous. Dylan is now at university, studying engineering like me. He has grown into a man of integrity who values honesty above all else. Clara, my brave Clara, has finally freed herself from the weight of that dark secret. We went through months of family therapy, and today she is a vibrant young artist who uses her experience to help other teenagers going through situations of parental manipulation. They spend most of their time with me here in Cornwall, and our relationship has never been so deep and true. They saw their father fight for justice ethically, without resorting to violence or pettiness, and that gave them a model of conduct that no school could ever teach. But the biggest surprise life had in store for me was Patricia. What began as a strategic alliance between two victims of betrayal slowly transformed into something much more solid and authentic. We spent months supporting each other during court hearings and moments of despair. We shared dinners where the topic wasn't just the legal process, but our dreams, our pains, and our view of the world. We discovered we had much more in common than just unfaithful spouses. Patricia is a woman of rare strength and intelligence, someone who understands the value of a promise and the importance of loyalty. 6 months ago, we decided to take a step forward and start building a life together. It wasn't a hasty decision born of need, but a mature choice between two adults who learned the hard way what really matters. She moved in here with me, and the harmony that reigns in this house is something I never thought possible. My children adore her, and she treats them with a respect and affection that their own biological mother was never capable of offering. Together, we have created a new concept of family based on absolute transparency and mutual support. Last week, I received an email from Natalie. It was a long message, full of lamentations and attempts to blame me for her current misery. She wrote that I was responsible for her being alone and in poverty. I read every word with absolute calm. In the past, a message like that would have kept me up at night or caused uncontrollable fury. Today, I only felt a slight pity for someone who had everything and destroyed it all for a selfish whim. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. I deleted the message and emptied the email's recycle bin, just as I had done with the memories of her in my life. As night falls over the Cornish coast, Patricia joins me on the terrace with 2 glasses of wine. She rests her head on my shoulder, and we sit in silence, watching the stars begin to appear in the clear sky. I look at the ring on my finger, a symbol of a new commitment to life and to myself. The lesson I learned is that the most powerful revenge isn't hatred, but rather the success and happiness built on the ashes of what was destroyed. I didn't just survive the betrayal. I used it as fuel to become a better version of myself. Theo and Natalie remain trapped in the past, blaming the world for their wrong choices. Patricia and I are in the present, building a future where lies have no place. The circle has closed perfectly. Justice was done, not through force, but through law and truth. My story of pain has become a story of triumph. As the last ray of sun disappears into the ocean, I know, with every fibre of my being, that being forced to offer that apology was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the trigger that fired the gun of truth and gave me the freedom I never even knew I needed. Now, finally, I can breathe.